And then let's move to our first panel. On va commencer avec notre premier panel de discussion. Et je vais vous demander d'accueillir mes intervenants. Please welcome Mr. Thorsten Steinmann, CEO of E+S Rock and Executive Committee Member at Hanover Re. Mr. Belhassan Tonet, Senior Executive Manager, PNC at Munich Re. Mr. Lee Wolfram, Policy Analyst at the Directorate for Financial and Enterprise Affairs at the OECD. And Absamad Ngoudi, Head of Agriculture for EMA and Director of Parametric Sales International at Gallagher Re. So, thank you gentlemen for being with us today. Merci. Je sais que bon, comme je vous l'ai dit tout à l'heure, on va pouvoir mélanger un peu français et anglais. But oui, on va essentially we're gonna speak English. Don't worry. Okay, so for you, Thomas, we're gonna speak English. So let me just introduce this discussion because we have 40 minutes, and really I really want to have a very participative discussion between us and to be very spontaneous about three main questions. Well, today we know that we have unpredictable damages, diseases, fires, floods, and a lot of things happens that are very that cost a lot in terms of human beings and money. We need predictability, I guess. And what's the less predictable thing we have today? Unless Donald Trump and my wife. She's not here. No. I predicted that. But the question is, the losses we have today, let's start with this, and to see the kind of losses we tend today due to climate change, and how can we use AI to assess the risk, and especially for the reinsurance companies. That's the real question we have to answer today, and to link with the regulation, because that's always the same topic on every kind of branch of insurance. So let's start with this question. This loss that we're attending today due to climate changes or diseases, I guess, are they really linked directly to the climate change? Thomas?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. So first of all, I'm really pleased that we make climate change a topic here in this conference. I know the geopolitical situation, the economic situation you were hinting to would almost propose a different agenda, but there's one thing which is here to stay, and this is climate change. Yeah, so from this perspective, really grateful we're making this as a topic. I remember me saying in one of the panel discussions, I think it was in Monte Carlo 3-4 years ago, where I said $100 billion of insured losses is the new normal. I have to say though, I mean, when I look at 2024, for instance, I think the insured loss was at 150 billion. The year before it was close to that number. The 100 billion is not the new normal anymore. It is much higher, that number. Yeah, let's don't forget this. And actually, also 2025, we had a really tough start with the wildfires in California. Yeah, estimates between 30 and 40 billion US dollars. So climate change is absolutely here to stay. The interesting part and of those nat cat losses is that most of them are coming from what we call in the industry secondary perils. I think 50 years ago, you had the earthquakes and the storms, right? Today, more than 50% of this 140 billion of insured losses is coming from drought losses, from hail losses, from flood losses, from wildfire losses. And this is, from my perspective, from our perspective, something which is clearly linked to climate change, and we have to do something about it.
So just talking about the kind of losses, and we spoke about that earlier before the panel. There are the direct losses, and then the indirect losses that we can assess months, years after, you know, this kind of phenomenon? I mean, with the drought and temperatures rising up, we can have, you know, building expanding, contracting, and then you have a lot of damages that can appear. Do you take this in account in the losses due to the climate change?
I think that the losses that we are seeing, the increase of the insured losses, we cannot draw only one conclusion and saying, okay, all the losses across the globe are linked to climate change. I think Bill Hassan said this earlier tomorrow, that there is a new science now trying to understand what is the percentage of the change in the losses that is attributed to climate change. So I think based on every and each region, I think we need to see what is the impact from climate change in this increased insured losses. There is another topic which is linked to the economic development, which is a reality. We have more and more concentration of the insured value in some risky areas. We have the cost of rebuilding post-event that also participate in increasing the bill of the insurance of the 150 billion, for example, in 2024, litigation, etc. And I think that this increase of the insured losses can be explained by different reasons. Among them, there is obviously climate change, but also some socio-economic reasons.
Lee.
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, it's clear that there's a lot of things that are driving the increase in losses. There's inflation, there's increasing rebuilding costs. Soon we're going to see tariffs, for example. There's a lot of things that are increasing the cost. But I think the point that Thorsten made about you know, the losses being driven by these so-called secondary perils, the climate science, from my understanding, and I'm not a climate scientist, those are the types of perils that are going to be impacted by changes in temperature, by changes in precipitation. Things like earthquakes, you know, are not linked to climate change. Storms, I think, or cyclones, I think, are linked, but you know, with some uncertainty about whether the frequency will increase or not. It's really the precipitation-based flooding, the drought conditions, the drier conditions, the growth of vegetation that leads to fires. Those are the predicted climate change impacts that are driving losses more and more.
Faisal, maybe two fundamental questions is about climate change. And I think if we would be here 10 years ago, we were questioning if climate change has an impact on what we see. I joined Thorsten in what he said. In the last 5 years, we have seen insured losses in excess of 140 billion US dollars. If I get the slide on the screen, it shows this is the average temperature increase from 1850 until today. You see these blue bars from until 1930, we don't see them anymore. We don't have years where the temperature of the year is below the average of pre-industrial times. So it's a fact that climate change is here and climate change is having an impact on what we do. If we look to the last 10 years, every year is talking to the previous year and tells him, I'm going to be the new record. So the 10 last years are the 10 hottest years in the history of humanity. And this is really where you think that, is it now something which we will debate, or it's something which is here to stay? I think the latter is the answer. The second topic is about, is climate change having an impact on the frequency and severity of the natural catastrophes we see? 10 years ago, we used to say, and if you hear this official statement actually from Munich Re, we say, we cannot 100% attribute it to climate change, but we believe it's a huge contributor to the increase. What has happened in the last 10 years is the topic of today's conference is artificial intelligence. And with the data we are now gaining, we are able to quantify the impact of climate change on the frequency and severity. Just to give two numbers, what has happened in Europe 2001, one of the biggest or the costliest storm called Bernd at that time, thanks to the artificial intelligence and the studies we are making, we know that a storm like this has a likelihood of 1.2 more times to happen than in the past. And in terms of severity, it has 40 to 70% more likelihood to cause more damages than it caused in the past. So if you see with artificial intelligence, we moved from 10 years ago to tell you, yeah, we suspect there is an impact, but we can't quantify it. Today, we are not there to tell you it's exactly to be 5 times more. We are putting intervals. And this is thanks to the artificial intelligence and the data we are gaining. So we are having a much better computing power to define and to determine the impact of climate change.
So I understand that, we were based on, data of last, not centuries, but 1 century. I don't know how many years we were based on for, predictable models for what's happening in the world. And now artificial intelligence allows this with taking into account a lot of all the kind of data to assess the impact. So how can we use AI? That's the heart of the question, and especially for reinsurance companies to assess the risk, to optimize the risk management, and then necessarily to maybe assess can we predict, for instance, this year in 2025, what's going to happen until December, maybe next month, the kind of impact, the kind of losses, the amount of losses in each area. So how can we use AI to improve this?
Yeah, this is the $100 billion question probably. Unfortunately, AI cannot prevent climate change losses, right? Because Mother Nature will also next month and next year do what Mother Nature wants to do, right? So this is obviously not the topic, but the topic is how we can prepare better from a risk management perspective, yeah? And I think for 3 things AI can do to the reinsurance industry, and that's a reinsurance panel mainly, plus OECD, if I may include you in our group. And from my perspective, 3 major things. So number 1, operational efficiency. Number 2, claims handling. And number 3, underwriting, right? This is where AI can really have an impact. Operational efficiency, to be honest, I think yesterday, who followed the day yesterday, we spoke a lot about operational efficiency. I would like to skip that part. But underwriting and claims are definitely 2 very interesting areas. The things that we discuss with our clients and that we are seeing and that we are also about to implement in our company is, think about satellite images, right? Data that you can get from NASA, from other companies, right? This is almost free and accessible. The problem with this data is it is not very granular. You can hardly see details of buildings, etc. But it gives you a good overview about a certain area, number 1. Number 2, the ingredient is you now need to train a model. I call it the AI model. And this AI model, you train by, for instance, telling the AI model program it a way that you say, look at burned structures, look at flood zones, look at destroyed roofs, something like that, right? That's the second step. And the third step is then you have usually, not in all markets, I get it, but we are getting there slowly, geo-encoded data in your underwriting system, right? And when you overlay all those 3 things together, right, you know exactly after a loss, where's my accumulation exposure, right? Where do I have most of the insured assets sitting in my portfolio, right? This is a very powerful tool which is already being used today. It influences your pricing, your risk management, your accumulation control, right? From my perspective, this is a game changer for the industry. Now, in terms of the losses, if I can just add this 1 sentence, it is not a surprise that, that was the first time the California wildfires, I think companies were coming out after 2 weeks roughly to say the loss is 30 to 40 billion industry loss. And this would have not been possible 3 years ago without AI. Exactly the technology that I was just describing, people are using in order to have a first estimation of a loss, to put an adequate reserve in their books and then fine-tune it. It's very interesting to see. The first estimate came out after 2 weeks, And now those numbers are being confirmed. And from our perspective, AI is part of that. So it's very powerful.
If I may add something on the underwriting side and pricing, I think that understanding the climate change modeling is very important. And I think now we are living in a world where the climate change modeling becomes very important, and it should be enhanced with the AI. And sometimes we can make maybe some, we should make the difference between AI and all these new methods of machine learning and statistics that should be integrated in our modeling. And all of this together can participate in enhancing the modeling. If we see about the insurability of some risks, for example, we should understand in which world we will be tomorrow. And I think this is based on all the pathways that has been drawn by the IPCC, and every actuary in underwriting, we should make the right assumptions when we would like to insure some risks. Think about wildfire, for example. Some areas are seeing an obvious trend of frequency, of the extent of wildfires, and understanding this by integrating new informations, new data sources, large information, large amount of data that should be crunched, and we should be prepared to integrate this in our pricing. It would probably and obviously help us in understanding the world where we will live tomorrow, and also understand how Earth will also react based on these pathways that we are going toward in them. There is an important point in France. I don't know if France Assureur is still here, but the French government have asked the insurance sector to think about a world in 2050 where we will be in a world with 2.7 degrees, right? So we have seen the, now we are at 1.5 post COP21, 2.7 degrees by 2050, and plus 4 degrees by 2100. And this, I think the insurance sector should be prepared, because we are going to see an increase of heat waves, an increase of health, impact on health of people, about some sectors like tourism, etc., and we should be prepared and prepare the mitigation and adaptation of economies.
I'll just maybe add to that, because with AI, you can do the simulations within an interval. And the answer to your question, Abdul Samad, is a little bit here. By 2100, if we have the 2.7 degrees Celsius higher, the slide is there. I think you have seen the
Can we have the
in Dubai.
presentation, please?
You don't know how many inhabitants are there. 70,000 now today living there. Average price of a house on the Palm in Dubai is 10 million dirham, roughly, so 2 to 3 million euros. 2100, this will be 5 to 10 centimeters sea level above. So the value of all the houses which are bought today, you can imagine how worth they are in 2100. So this is just the simulations of, if you are insurers, and most of you here are, you want to insure it for 2100? Big question mark. So this would be one of the impacts.
If we had AI in the 19th century, maybe we wouldn't have California today.
True.
Yep.
You wouldn't have the Palm Island today.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm coming to the second topic, what you mentioned, is AI the answer to climate change? So I would, before we go to the how, I would maybe put a disclaimer to say if AI is really the answer. And I'll give you just one number. You know, for AI, what do you need? We need brains and you need energy. Do you know how much energy we need? In today's installations of AI, we need 1.5% of the electricity consumption worldwide for data center. 1.5, you say, is nothing. This is the consumption of a country like Japan. So Japan's 1 year consumption of electricity is used for data center. Now, how many of you do believe that AI is the answer to climate change? One. Come on, guys. Really? Okay. He did the math. Now, by applying AI to 2 points, 2 things. How do you combat climate change? Guys, next slide.
Next slide, please.
Okay, it will come later. If this works, it will come. No, what I want to say, there's 2 points. You mitigate the CO2 emissions, and number 2, you adapt. It's very easy, so it's not rocket science. So if you want to combat climate change, you just reduce the CO2 emissions and you mitigate it. Is AI reducing CO2 emissions? You add a country like Japan every year with data center. Question mark if this is really the case. But here is the trick. If we use artificial intelligence in optimizing one of these factors, CCS is carbon concentration, carbon storage, captivation storage system. So that's how you take CO2 from the air, you store it somewhere. You go to hydrogen, you go to power storage, you transmit the energy more efficiently. And here I want to mention one example. KEPCO, our colleagues from Korea would know, this is the Korean electricity company. They do use AI in predicting the weather impact on the wind and the generation of energy. So they know in 10 hours from now, there will be less wind, so now we produce with gas and coal. If there is enough wind, we will not produce now. What others do, they always have a plan B. We produce with coal, just if there is no sun, we will have lights with coal or a gas. So this is a waste. If with artificial intelligence, we arrive to spare 1% of this, this makes 5% less consumption. So now you add the math, you increase by 1.5, and you reduce by 5. So artificial intelligence is helping. So Faisal is right.
Thank you. I'm right today. Lee.
Maybe I could just add something on this. The important, what's left-hand side for me, right-hand side for you, is the adaptation resilience element. I think one of the things we haven't mentioned so far is the ability of, despite the not very granular Earth observation imagery that's out there. I mean, there's commercial. It's getting better. AI gives you the ability to really assess the risk at a more granular level, at the level of individual properties, and ultimately to provide better advice on how to mitigate the risk and adapt to it. And I mean, if you look at insurance plays a huge role in providing risk advice to their clients, although mostly to their bigger clients, to the large corporations. It's not very economical for insurance companies to go to a household with a small premium and tell them how they can reduce the risk. AI gives them, I think, the ability to develop that tailored advice more easily and provide that advice and hopefully help society adapt much more quickly than without the tool.
What we've seen about the forecast in 2100, does it mean that we're necessarily heading to uninsurable areas in the world? And so what will be the impact? So maybe we won't insure anymore in some areas with this kind of data that we have, Thorsten.
Yeah. I mean, this is another good question, and which is being discussed in the industry quite often. To be honest, there will be certain areas in the world where it will be very hard to find insurance. Yeah.
I mean, that was the question after the great fires in California.
Yeah, exactly. This is one example, but this is a very dramatic example. I can even go into my home country, Germany, where we had devastating flood losses. The name for it was Burned in 2021. And massive losses, massive flood losses. And believe it or not, 3 years later, the same buildings were rebuilt at the same place as they were before, although there were flood zones, right? And then you wonder why some insurance companies and also reinsurance companies say, hey, we really have a problem to insure that business again, right? California, I mean, the unfortunate thing is usually, where is it nice to live? It's usually close by the sea, close by a river, in a forest, etc., etc. Unfortunately, exactly those are the areas which are very much exposed to climate change because of fire, because of flood losses, etc., etc. So to your question, we try to insure 100% of the world. However, it will not be possible going forward. I think the bigger challenge from my perspective, and here we talk about the topic of you know, how can we secure insurability? How can we increase the insurance penetration? Morocco is a perfect example, 1%, right? We need to get this number up. We have to get this number up to 2, 3, 5, even more percentage. But it's not only a problem in Morocco. I mean, I give you another example. Germany, only 50% of the buildings are insured against flood. Compared to 1% in Morocco, it's a high number. But when you think about in a relatively rich country in Germany, why is it not 100%? So it is our obligation as an industry to close that protection gap as much as we can through innovative but also affordable insurance products and through adequate reinsurance products as well.
I think, Thorsten, it's a good point that you have mentioned in Morocco. We can spend some time speaking about Morocco. In my opinion, I think it's not only a question on are we going toward a world where some risks are no longer insurable. I think we need to focus on how should we and how the public authorities need to be involved in insuring this population. Speak about drought, for example, in Morocco, which becoming maybe systemic risk. So we have drought every year. And I think we need to have a public-private partnership to continue to insure some vulnerable areas, especially for farming, for example, for agriculture in Morocco, where this industry is really important for the economy. And I think the private sector can no longer be alone in accepting, ensuring 100% of some risks, wildfire, drought, flooding, and other secondary perils, that they are no longer secondary perils.
I maybe add two sentences to that. So the easy answer is always when things happen like California fires and things like that, maybe people would tend to say not insurable anymore. So the no is the easy answer always. So before we go there, I would say we try to push the boundaries of insurability, try to put as much as we can in order to make this a sustainable scheme. The first, you know how much a house usually pays in terms of insurance in the US? Okay, the house prices are a bit on the high side, but it comes to $30,000 to $50,000 per year. This is the annual premium of an average house in California. So it's quite a substantial amount. So if you double this and so on, due to the climate change, it becomes uninsurable. So in order to push, the first thing is really prevention and building in areas which are less prone to catastrophe. So the basis which we learned in insurance is unpredictability. If I know that there's going to be a loss there in the next 2 years, it's against the fundamental law of insurance, which is unforeseen event. So this is what the problem we have in Germany, people's building and rebuilding again on the riverbeds. So it's your own decision to want to have a nice house on the river, or you go 1 kilometer up and you have a better protection. And you have some house which you can inherit into your children, or it's going to be destroyed in the next 20 years.
But excuse me, it can be a concern for developed countries. But you've just said something very important. We get a growth potential for insuring houses. So if you want to go beyond this 1%, 2%, 5%, you have to deal with existing areas. So maybe we're talking about the future, maybe other areas that will be built. So how can we address these existing markets that can be touched by floods, fires, climate changes? You can't change, you can't remove population from this kind of
Happy to take it. That's what I say here. In countries like Morocco, where the penetration is at 1% of GDP, there is a lot to do to push the boundaries of insurability, and hereby two things. The public-private partnerships, so having some insurances going also to be compulsory. That I know the government in Morocco is doing a lot on the multi-risque habitation, so the household insurance, for example, here. So you create a much bigger pool where the losses of the ones will be mitigated through the premiums of the others. So we play on the law of large numbers to make these houses insurable. And that's what I mean by pushing the boundaries. This is one solution. The second one, adapted products to the needs of the people. So it means you can get, in Morocco, we have a very nice scheme which is called the FSEC. So it's a parametric cover in case of earthquake, and it has paid and it has proven its concept in the last earthquake in Marrakesh. So by enhancing and increasing the numbers of people insured, this is the next solution here for the Moroccan market. So for emerging market like here, I think the sky is the limit. There is a lot which can be done before we arrive to say, no, it's not insured.
Lee, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, no, I was just going to build a little bit on that public-private partnerships concept. I think one of the things that needs to be kept in mind is that I think there's a real risk in the future that if the insurance sector in general doesn't use the tools that are increasingly becoming available to help prevention, to come up with sort of adaptable products. I mean, I think that it's clear that the government has a role in these public-private partnerships, and the sector can't do it alone. But I think if insurance penetration isn't dealt with, eventually the government's just going to assume more and more of that risk and socialize it in some ways. I mean, there's a lot of countries where a lot of the risk is being borne by the governments, and increasing risk is being borne by the governments, and it's because ultimately the insurance market isn't working. Not only because of supply, it's also a demand issue, and maybe mostly a demand issue. But I think that's a real risk to the insurance sector going forward.
I want to say one word on this topic. Now we are speaking about how to insure. So when it comes for the insurance market and the reinsurance market to create the product and to design the product, now we are going to go back to the topic of our discussion now on sometimes in some countries where you don't have any data and you need to create. Speak about Africa, when we have pushed to create a parametric scheme for drought, then we were using satellite imagery, gridded data. We have now tremendous data sources that we can use to design and to structure the product. We can think about flood, for example, where now we are partnering with companies that are using Earth observation, and we can recreate the historical event using AI, especially using only some small data sources. We can put together maps of the historical floods and then trying to understand sometimes the water depth and trying to design the right product for some specific periods.
Okay, let's address now one topic very important that we talked about in every kind of insurance branch. Regulators and regulation to use AI, and especially in the reinsurance companies. So can we know how regulators maybe enhance or maybe blocked the use of AI for reinsurance companies, and what can we do in the future to make things happen easily?
Yeah, so first of all, we have to comply with regulation, full stop, right? There's no way around it. There was a fantastic presentation yesterday from IOPA. I don't know if you've seen it, based on the EU AI regulation. And this is one of the first countries coming out with something like that. And that is something, even if it is early days, we need to adopt in our processes. For me, the biggest challenge, and this is closely linked to regulation, is the usage of data. There's a saying in Germany, and maybe you have something similar here, we call it garbage in, garbage out. When you feed your machine learning system with the wrong data, inconsistent data, and you should not expect that your fabulous AI model is producing something which makes you happy. It probably provides an answer to some of the questions, but to be honest, is it really the answer you can rely on, right? So for me, this whole regulation about data, where's the data coming from? Also, can you interpret the data that is coming out of the system? This is for me key around this regulation, and we have to comply with regulation, full stop. And therefore, for me, and therefore I'm grateful that you're bringing that question, because we should not think that this whole AI is the holy grail and will heal the world. Not at all. We have to balance the risk and the opportunities, and regulation will help us with that. It's a big topic also in the boardrooms of the insurance companies, of your companies, and also in the boardrooms of reinsurance. From my perspective, At the moment, we talk probably a little bit more about the risks coming from AI rather than the opportunities, right? It's also probably the wrong ratio, but we should keep a good balance on this topic.
Just one point to add.
Because AI issues are the same in every sector. Inclusion, exclusion, that we talked about yesterday.
That's the point.
Yeah. So
I think one point on that,
ethics and compliance.
What's the role of regulator? The role of regulator is to have a good functioning insurance industry, but also to protect the weakest in the society. So the societal role of ACAPs here in Morocco, for example, and the way how they do it, we need to make sure that when you push the personifications of the products, the usage of AI, it should not be at the cost of excluding the most vulnerable and the weakest in the society. And this is where you find the right balance between using AI to have a better product, to have a more personalized product, but we should not really get away from our fundamental societal role, which is providing insurance for everyone.
It's not only from ethical point of view, but I think also for insurance companies on the way to control what we are doing. Do we want just to rely on a black box where we are using huge amount of data? Maybe hyper-personalization is good, but we don't know what are the variables that we are using to feed our model and then to have the price that we want to do.
Maybe just to add sort of a slightly different angle, I think there's also some things that might impact how incentivized insurance companies are to innovate in this area. And so, for example, things like pricing regulation, especially in pure tariff markets where there's a fixed price for coverage for natural hazard risks. I think that creates a real disincentive for companies to innovate and come up with new pricing models. Why are they going to invest in trying to better assess the risk if the price is going to be fixed in any case, and maybe they're transferring a large share to a reinsurer at a fixed price, and so ultimately there's very little incentive to innovate. The other one, and I think touching on the data point that was made, is this whole issue of sort of outsourcing and data localization and cross-border data flows, because I think we heard yesterday from some of the studies that have been done in the US, these third-party vendors are very important to innovation in this area, and they're not always going to be in your country, and they're going to be using a cloud that might have data stored somewhere else, and so these things definitely have to be overseen, and I'm not going to suggest that they shouldn't, but I think there needs to be a balance and a consideration of what the impact might be on access to data, on access to the innovation that's going on in different parts of the world.
Talking from the perspective of reinsurance companies, because you don't address the final clients directly, your partners are the insurance companies, and then the companies are just addressing the clients. Well, is there a danger to add layers of many AI tools? I just thinking about this. You can have some models from the reinsurance companies, and then that will be added to insurance companies' models. So have we thought about this, to add some layers, and maybe we don't know what that's gonna give?
At the moment, I think most of the companies, including Hannover Re, we are testing and learning, and we trial and error, and we fail miserably, and then the next tool is very successful. I think what you are alluding to, and I think this is a very valid point, everybody is cooking in their own kitchen right now, right? But I expect this to change. I expect this to change through industry forums, through insurance association, through conferences like this, where you really foster collaboration, where you compare notes. What are you doing in this space? That exactly this layering on one and the same topic, one of the same thing, is not happening. And I expect this to happen once this trial and error phase is over.
I think there's one way to do it is we all recognize that developing your own AI models is not maybe the best solutions, because whatever you do, you have a limited data or limited access to a certain amount of data. So we, from a reinsurance perspective, we can have started some industry-wide collaborations with many insurance companies in the world on specific topic where we put all our data in a data lake, anonymized, and try to find out what would be the value out of this data, and the amount will be shared with these companies. So this is how the way, in order to avoid that, there are layering, and everybody is cooking a little bit of different soup with different ingredients, and the taste at the final taste is not really the best one. So there are first pilot projects in order to contribute and to work together with other companies on that.
Okay, guys, we've come to the end of the discussion. That was smooth. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm very happy to repeat always the same thing when we talk about AI. We need NI to talk about NI. And you were there. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Vous pouvez les applaudir.
Thank you.
And let's have a picture. On fait une photo. And then we have a coffee break. Don't go too far, please, so we can stick to the time.